Well, we can't talk about the story of Agripunica without talking about Giacomo Tachis, the famous winemaker. He had been working here in Sardinia and specifically in the south for about 20 years when, at the beginning of this century, around the 2001, he thought about creating a new wine which could be an iconic Sardinian wine. He had been winemaking for Cantina Sant'Adi, as I said, for 20 years, making great wines and taking advantage of the great potential the Carignano grape has for making fine wines. He thought, to use Carignano mostly, but he was also a master of the mixing. So he thought to add smaller percentages of Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot to make a red wine which could represent Sardinia, but also could be very approachable to foreign markets.
Fascinating people with stories to share, fabulous wines and the best local foods to accompany them, and beautiful places to discover and visit. All of this and more on Wine, Food and Travel with me, Marc Millon, on the Italian Wine Podcast. Join me for a new episode every Tuesday. Welcome to Wine, Food and Travel with me, Marc Millon, on Italian Wine Podcast. Today we travel to Sardinia, to Sant'Adi, in the southwest corner of the island, the Basso Sulcis, to meet my guest, Salvatore Santus, who is the export manager of the iconic Agripunica winery. Buongiorno, Salvatore. Many thanks for being my guest today. How are you, and is it a beautiful day in Sardinia?
Buongiorno, everyone. Yes, it's actually a beautiful day today. It's sunny, temperatures are raising up, and that's exactly what we want. It's full spring. Everything is, blossoming everywhere. So nice perfumes and smells from all the trees around. So yeah, that's one of the periods of the year I prefer, actually.
Yeah, is it getting hot yet?
It has actually been hot for a few days. Let's say it's warm. It's pleasantly warm, around 25 degrees. So that's very nice.
Well, I'm in southwest England, and it's a beautiful day here too, and it's pleasantly warm, which for us means around 18 or 19 just at the moment,
Yeah.
which we're happy with. Yeah.
It's enough. It's enough to enjoy it.
That's right. That's right. Now, Salvatore, we actually had a conversation a few weeks ago, but had some technical glitches. So we're recording again, and since then, of course, there has been opera wine, and in Italy, we had a chance to meet briefly at opera. How was it for you and Agripunica? Do you feel an optimism for the future and for the wine market in general?
Well, if I have to comment about opera wine and Vinitaly, I am certainly positive. I had very good, audience at Opera Wine, of course. That's let's say, an event organized by Wine Spectator. So there's always a lot of attention to that event, and we are very proud to be part of it. Vinitaly was very intense. I had the 3 days with a lot of appointments and a lot of people coming by. So yes, it was again a good Vinitaly. On future perspective, well, we, let's say, are still positive, but we would need some signals arriving, from the business and from the, let's say, economic world, in terms of maybe solving some issues which are going around. And I don't mean, exactly in the wine business. I'm talking about the wars. I'm talking about everything that it's hurting each and every one of us in terms of, economy. The economy of each country. So we all hope there will be a solution to these dreadful wars. I think we can get back, on track, and have trust in the future, and also invest. Also, everyone working in this chain of the wine business will be more stimulated to do more, and that's exactly what we all need. All in all, we are doing good, but always we compare to the recent past, and before COVID, it was actually a different matter.
Yeah, you're right. The world certainly since COVID has changed, and as you say, we're living in uncertain times with some crazy events going on around the world that are seemingly outside of control. But anyway, as you say, the sun is shining in Sardinia, the sun is shining here, and there's good wine to drink. Salvatore, take us to Sardinia. Take us to the Basso Sulcis. Describe where you are so our listeners who are located all around the world can actually get an idea, a picture of your corner of the second largest island in the Mediterranean.
Yes, we are in the southwest part of Sardinia. So geographically, we are in the heart of the Mediterranean. It's, let's say, an area where most of the economy is based on the agriculture, but also on anything related to tourism and to fishing all around the coast, of course. It's a very green area. We, let's say, are lucky to live in a nice environment. It's partly mountainous and partly, alternates to valleys and plateaus. And the coast is actually not too far from where we are. As the crow flies, we are about 7, 8 kilometers away, just talking about 15 minutes drive to get to the shores. Apart from that, is also an area vocated for the viticulture. So there are a lot of vineyards, and most of them are cultivating the main red grape, which is the Carignano. This typical and autochthonous grape. It's actually considered to be a native grape from Sardinia, and specifically from this part of Sardinia, the southwest, the Sulcis. Sulcis is the name of this sub-region which covers all the southwest part of the island. It's an ancient land, okay, populated since many thousands years ago by the Sardinians, the Nuragic civilization, and then the Phoenicians, the Carthaginians, and then the Romans, and so on. So we also have our own language, the Sardo, and these are just a few things I can tell all the listeners about Sardinia. And the icing in the cake is the beautiful beaches all around and the crystal sea waters we all have here, starting from the Iglesias, which is in the west part, and then going south to the islands of Sant'Antioco and San Pietro, which are two islets just outside of the southwest part of Sardinia, and then going again towards east, Portofino, Teulada, and so on. These are magical places for everyone that wants to have an holiday by the beach in summer, starting in May until mid of October. It's actually very popular. Many Italians come over here on holidays, and also many people from other countries. We are getting more and more every year.
Yes, that's actually a very good overview of Sardinia and of the attractions of Sardinia. This contrast between the beautiful coastal areas and a rugged interior, a mountainous interior, and this rich history going back thousands of years. As you say, the Nuragi, the Phoenicians, the Romans, and of course the Spanish were were ruling Sardinia
Yes.
for some centuries, weren't they?
Yeah, actually for 400 years, for centuries.
For 400 years, wow.
Yeah, starting in the 13th century. For centuries, we had the Spaniards here, and also some traces, and they left some traces on the language of Sardo, as also some words of Spanish origins, though Sardo language is a very ancient and pre-existing to the Latin. So has, let's say, has had a lot of influences. But nowadays it's a mix of, old Latin words, a little bit of Italian as well, of course, and as I said, some influence from the Spanish language. But yes, the Spaniards stay here for quite a long. Unfortunately, they didn't leave anything in terms of, buildings or cathedrals or anything like that, as you may think maybe they have done in Central and South America. Here in Sardinia, they just, at that time, they were focused on taking rather than, giving.
Oh, that's interesting because Sicily, of course, had
Yeah.
Spanish rule as well, and Palermo is a city very much with a Spanish influence.
Yes, Sicily is definitely, in terms of art, in terms of monuments, has definitely a lot more. Let's just consider that Sicily has about 4 times the inhabitants of Sardinia. Okay, so it's much more populated. Over the centuries, definitely they had probably, more opportunities than Sardinia. Sardinia is a bit far away from the mainland, so somehow, yes, we had influences from different populations, but probably less than Sicily. But we do have monuments, but very ancient, because I'm referring to the nuraghi. The nuraghi, which are typical of Sardinia, these conic stone buildings built up, different thousands years ago by the nuragic civilization. Nowadays, most of them are in ruins, but there are so many everywhere, in every town, in every village. There are a few of them still in good shape, which can be visited and are actually one of the attractions of Sardinia. So, in terms of history, let's say that Sardinia has something which was, let's say, built up long before the today's Sicilian history. In terms of
Sure,
monuments, I'm talking about monuments, of course.
sure. Well, let's turn to a more recent story, Salvatore. The story of this remarkable winery, Agripunica. The name, of course, reflects the Phoenician, I guess.
Mhm.
But you mentioned opera wine, and of course, opera wine brings together the wine spectators. 130 or so of the greatest wines from all over Italy, and Agripunica has long been a flag bearer for Sardinia. So tell us the story of this iconic winery.
Yes, well, we can't talk about the story of Agripunica without talking about Giacomo Tachis, the famous winemaker, because he was the one that thought first to, let's say, join together with some other people of the wine business and make this winery. He had been working here in Sardinia and specifically in the south for about 20 years when, at the beginning of this century, around the 2001, he thought about creating a new wine, which could be an iconic Sardinian wine. And he had been winemaking for Cantina Sant'Adi, as I said, for 20 years, making great wines and taking advantage of the great potential the Carignano grape has for making fine wines. But he thought, to use Carignano mostly, but he was also a master of the mixing, as he used to say. So he thought to add smaller percentages of Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot and to make a wine, a red wine, which could represent Sardinia, but also could be very approachable to foreign markets. So the idea was to create the wine, and then around this wine they made the winery. Okay, so they thought to make a new entity to produce this wine, and then to, let's say, start a business focusing mostly on the export. So targeting, foreign markets. He, let's say, persuaded other two gentlemen of the wine business to follow him in this, putting in place this project. And he convinced, so the Marquis Incisa della Rocchetta, owner of Tenuta San Guido in Tuscany, and Mr. Antonello Piloni, the president of Cantina Sant'Adi, to invest some money and to make this new winery here in Sardinia. That's how it was. In 2002, the company was actually set up. So they purchased two estates, okay, for an overall of 155 hectares of land, of which at that time in 2002 there were pre-existing vineyards of about 20 hectares. But soon after they started obviously planting new vineyards. So it all started this way, and in a few years we had, let's say, around 65 hectares of vineyards, mostly, actually, almost all planted with red grapes, Carignano mainly, but also French varietals such as Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Syrah, and Merlot. So in 2002, the very same year of the foundation of the company, Tachis made also the wine Barrua. That's the wine I was talking about. This blend of Carignano, a little bit of Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot. And then 3 years later, in 2005, he made the second red, Montesso, again a blend of Carignano, is 60% Carignano, and the remaining 40% is made of Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot again, but on top of that, we also have some Syrah and some Cabernet Franc. So in a few years, the company started trading. In 2005, we started selling the first production of Barrua, because it took about 3 years to be ready. It's a barreled wine. And yeah, we started, selling the wine in different countries in Europe, but also outside of Europe. And let's say it's exactly what we developed over the years and what we are doing today. We export in about 38 to 40 different countries worldwide.
Okay, well, it's a remarkable story of this great winemaker, Giacomo Tachis, considered the father of super Tuscan wines for the work he, of course, did with the Antinori family, the creation of wines such as Tignanello and Solaya, and many other wines, great wines
Yes.
that he produced. And I guess here was a vision to create a super Sardinian wine in that same mold, but with the character, the personality, the uniqueness of Sardinia, and a very strong partnership then with the Marchesi Incisa della Rocchetta from Tenuta San Guido, Sassicaia fame, and Antonello Piloni of the Cantina di Sant'Adi. Did you say Giacomo Tachis had been working with the Cantina di Sant'Adi for 20 years prior to this start of the project?
Yes, he started in 1980. When he first arrived to Sardinia, and he stayed for quite long. So he was already working for Cantina Sant'Adi at that time, and he still remained until, he was affected by a disease in the last years of his life. But he kept on winemaking until 2010, and then I remember, in the following years, he was still working from home. I used to send all the samples to him at home. So for the next 2 to 3 years, until 2012 roughly, he kept working jointly with another winemaker he appointed to follow all the tasks here at the winery. Obviously was one of his long-term collaborators. So he passed away in 2016, but he left us, every one of us, and I think he left to Italy a big heritage in terms of knowledge in winemaking. He was definitely a genius. That's how everybody remembers him when talking about his incredible knowledge in winemaking and in everything related to the wine business. But he was also a man of great culture. He was passionate about history, for example. So he was definitely a remarkable man.
Yes, certainly. And as you say, the legacy that he left for Italy, for Italian wine lovers, because he was one of the principal people behind the renaissance of modern Italian wine across the country. So a real inspiration. Of course, grapes are grown all across Sardinia, many different varieties. But Giacomo Tachis came to the Basso Sulcis and found here a terroir that he believed in the conditions that could uniquely be suited to the production of great red wine. What does the Basso Sulcis offer that attracted his attention, the attention of others?
Well, for sure, there are some unique conditions. Let's start with the soil, for example, which is it's a bit different comparing to the remaining of Sardinia, because southwest Sardinia, the soil is made of a mix of limestone, clay, sand, and some schist, while elsewhere in the middle of Sardinia, and northeast, we all know is more granitic, is a bit more rocky. So this is a quite big difference for anyone planting vineyards. And that's why probably Carignano found the most vocated area here in the southwest. But that's not all, because we obviously have also some specific climate conditions. Everywhere we look, the sea is not too far, so we benefit from the influence from the sea everywhere. And here in Southwest, even if we are in the interior, I mean, the sea, as the crow flies, as I said, is not far away, because this is a kind of stretch of land that is prolonged towards south, facing Africa. So the influence from the sea is very important and actually helps a lot cooling down the hot weather in summer. Over here, it gets hot actually, from end of June, July, and beginning of August. Sometimes, it's easy to reach 40 degrees in middle of July. So the sea helps on providing some freshness when we have these high temperatures, and that's also beneficial to the vines. And the last thing, Giacomo Tachis used to say that the intensity of the light here in southwest Sardinia was something he thought was unique. He said South Sardinia benefits of an intensity of the light which is specifically the correct one to make Carignano grape reach the correct ripening. So somehow that's the explanation why Carignano grows so well here in the Sulcis and it doesn't elsewhere in Sardinia. It's a series of a combination of different things that made this place, let's say, particularly good for growing Carignano grape.
Okay. That is really a good picture of the unique conditions in your corner. Salvatore, let's just look at the wines then so that our listeners get a real flavor of what Agripunica is producing. And as an aperitivo, let's begin with your white wine, Samas, the Isola dei Noraghi IGT, which again is a blend of native and French varieties. Tell us about this wine.
Yes, that's our white. We started in 2012 with the first vintage. It's a blend of Vermentino with a little bit of Chardonnay in it. The breakdown of the two varieties, 80% Vermentino, 20% Chardonnay. Well, it's definitely a fresh, crispy, easy to drink wine with lovely fruit notes and this distinguished minerality at the end. When drinking it, you really feel this salinity note that ends in a beautiful manner. The sip, and it's actually the wine that is even in these difficult times for the wine business. We are growing with this wine. We have grown again this year. We are producing about 54,000 bottles this year. So it's not a big production. It's smaller than the two reds, but is, let's say, appreciated in all the markets we are selling, specifically in the United States, which is our first market for this wine. But also we have exported this year quite a lot of it to China and all the other markets, of course, UK, Germany, Japan, and many others. I would say it's the perfect wine as aperitif. It's a summer wine, so this freshness can be the perfect company. Just if you want to taste something like seafood, fish, sushi or anything like that. But as aperitif as well, on its own, it can be a really good drink. Just think about the summer period when it gets hot. A glass of a fresh white wine like this can be very rewarding, or anyway
No, absolutely.
a good
Yes.
thing to to spend your afternoon maybe, or your evening.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm sure we'll talk in a minute about the gastronomy of Sardinia. I'm sure that this wine is perfect with some of your local dishes. Now, tell us about your flagship wine, the wine that you presented at Opera Wine, and I think which Agripunica is probably best known for, which is, of course, Barua.
Yes, Barua is definitely, as you said, our flagship wine. The first one made by Giacomo Tachis is definitely the more important, is the more structured wine with a lot of complexity. So definitely an elegant wine, good for any occasion. And of course, if we want to, let's say, enjoy this wine with a good meal, we can certainly take advantage also of the local cuisine, the Sardinian cuisine. You know that one of the main dishes here in Sardinia, and mostly in the interior of the island, is the roasted suckling pig, which is cooked in the way our ancestors does, a slow flame, and then at the end is often garnished with some myrtle leaves on top, just to add some flavors. But anyway, talking about a dish made of meat, of course, and a red wine like Barua is the perfect pairing for a dish like this. But also we can think about something else. A braised lamb, for example, pecorino cheese, which is the other, big production in terms of what Sardinian produces. Pecorino is definitely one of the most renowned cheeses here in Italy. So the wine is very gastronomic, so it's very eclectic and can be paired to different dishes. All in all, as I said, is a wine that has elegance, is made for aging. As the time goes by and the wine gets older, we can appreciate also an aged Barua with nice and elegant notes of leather, of ripened fruits and dry fruit. It is definitely one of those wines one can remember when drinking it. At Opera Wine, we brought the 2011 vintage, so 15 years older vintage, and we had a great results in terms of appreciation by everyone that passed by to taste it.
Yes, I remember tasting that and really enjoying it. It was so elegant and well knit. The tannins were evolved, and it was a beautiful glass of wine. Of course, at opera we're tasting so many great wines, and the wines that stand out are the ones that you really, really, really remember. And Barua is certainly one of those. I'm imagining it too, Salvatore, with that porce du, the suckling pig
Yeah.
on a hearth with a spit just turned in front of this fire on a hearth, that traditional, one of the great foods of Sardinia, one of the great foods of Italy. And I think that would be one of the great wine food pairings that every visitor to Sardinia must try and sample. Finally, Salvatore, just a word on Montessu.
Yes, Montessu is a wine again that was made by Takis a few years later, comparing to Barua, and made of Carignano again and some French varietals to complete the blend. Comparing to Barua is a bit less structured, but has a nice intensity. So it's a wine that somehow can be considered also good for the everyday drinking. Okay, has again good complexity. It's also a wine that has a long finish. So all in all, its balance makes Montessu, let's say, a very good wine to be enjoyed with a meal, a bit, let's say, less opulent comparing to Barua, but
Mhm.
it remains a great wine to be enjoyed either eating or also on its own. Why not? It's a wine again that has this good aging potential. You can keep it for about 12, 13, 14 years. And it's a wine that if you save the bottle in your cellar, for sure you can enjoy again a good wine after a few years. I would say, after 5, 6 years is the best window probably for drinking this wine, but ready since the beginning. It's a bit more lively, of course. The tannins are a bit more exuberant, but not too much. Always this roundness and softness in the two reds is always present. This character, which makes the wines, and Montessu specifically, a great wine to be enjoyed since the beginning, since when it's put on the market. Normally after a couple of years of making. It's again a
Okay.
barreled wine, stays in barrel for about 1 year. We don't use new barrels for Montessu, whilst for Barrua we use some new barrels. But it's actually our bestseller because it's the one we produce more. We produce every year around 130, 135,000 bottles. So a bit more than Barrua, which is around 110, 115,000. Yeah, it completes the lineup of the wines of Agripunica, and we are very proud also of Montessu.
Yes. This is a great trio of wines, and I can see, when the aim was to produce great wines, when Giacomo Tachis decided, along with the Marchese Incisa della Rocchetta and Antonello Piloni, to begin the project. The dream, the goal was to create wines that would reach the attention of the world. And you, as export manager, I'm sure, are spending most of your life traveling all around the world to the many different markets and bringing this flavor of Sardinia and often sampling your wines alongside different cuisines wherever you happen to be. And I'd be interested to know which of some of these international cuisines you feel pair particularly well with some of your wines. But just for the moment, let's stay in Sardinia and maybe give us a couple of more local dishes that every visitor should try and that would pair well with your wines.
Well, if we have to stay on meat side, then Sardinia produces, and actually Sardinia is a land where there are many farmers growing sheep, and so I can suggest also trying a few dishes made of lamb, for example, or the sheep, as I said, or goat. All these animals are quite common to see here all around. And from sheep, as I said, we produce milk and then the pecorino cheese. But Sardinia is an island, so we also have to consider that all around the coast, fish is what restaurants propose more. So as we can have in the interior mainly dishes based on meat, but as we approach and we get closer to the coast, we can also get some fabulous dishes made of fish. Fish and seafood is definitely something you can get easily in many resorts, but also in many villages all around the coast. It's nice small restaurants preparing this delicious food, which I particularly like. So the sea obviously offers us this product, which is then taken to the cuisine, the kitchen of many restaurants, but also of everyone that cooks at home. So this is another help and another part of the Sardinian cuisine.
Okay, that contrast between the harsher interior,
Yeah,
the more rugged foods, meat-based foods, and then this beautiful coastline with the rich fish and shellfish, and of course the botarga, which is such a flavor
and
of
yes,
Sardinia.
botarga.
Salvatore, would you say there's any particular global cuisine? I know you travel widely
Yep.
that you feel uh, the wines of Agripunica really show well with.
Um, well, I have to say that the first thing that comes up to my mind is when I travel to the United States, because sometimes it's a cuisine that is exactly the same as in Italy. There are a lot of Italian restaurants, but also when we, have a maybe a presentation of the wines in restaurants offering international cuisine. The American food is based, depending obviously on where you go, but we have plates like the hamburger, for example, which is may feel a simple thing available everywhere. That's basically meat again. They do it on different ways, and I remember enjoying something like this, which I would not consider as fast food because the quality was in there. Apart from that, traveling around Europe and also in the UK, I had the chance to try our wines with different cuisines. I would say that they are the wines can adapt to many different dishes and cuisine. Now, for example, talking about Far East, for example, I can mention, the match between sushi and our white salmons, which I found it great. So, all in all, I would say wines that can be paired to a lot of dishes, and one can enjoy the wines in many different ways and with many different cuisines.
That must be a very enjoyable part of your job, seeing how chefs around the world interpret dishes to pair with your
Yeah.
wines. Now, Salvatore, a final question. Our listeners often are looking to travel and visit places from conversations they hear here. Can our listeners visit Agripunica?
Yes, they can. Upon pre-booking, we need, to book the visit in advance because we don't run visits every day on daily basis. So we need to get an email, possibly a few weeks before, possibly even more if they are thinking to come over in summer, because in summer sometimes it happens that we are fully booked. Okay, but yes, it's also an opportunity we offer to everyone that wants to come and see us and enjoy a tasting with us. So we also encourage people to do that, but we just need to be advised a bit in advance.
Okay, of course. That's perfectly understandable. And I think many of our listeners will be looking to visit this famous and iconic wine estate if they find themselves in Sardinia. Salvatore, thank you so much for joining us today. It was great to briefly meet at Opera Wine a few weeks ago, but I would really myself welcome the chance to revisit Sardinia and to come down and see you. So I hope I can make that happen. But in the meantime, many thanks for being our guest today, and have a great day.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Buona giornata.
Grazie.
We hope today's episode of Wine, Food and Travel with me, Marc Millon, on the Italian Wine Podcast has transported you to somewhere special. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your pods. Likewise, you can visit us at ItalianWinePodcast.com. Until next time, chin chin.